There are plenty of articles and videos about the Slit-Mouthed Woman, with the focus on the "do you find me beautiful" encounter that we are all familiar with. I care much more about the origins and when, how, and where this all began. I first heard of this character from the Japanese horror movies of the 2000s, specifically Slit-Mouthed Woman and Carved. At the time, I bought any J-horror movie I could, and I saw a lot of truly awful ones, and these two definitely were near the bottom of the barrel for sure. At the time, I had no idea Slit-Mouthed Woman was actually a pink cinema movie, but that's a subject for an entirely different video. However, I did eventually see Carved, and that's the movie that famously depicted what would become the Slit-Mouthed Woman. The long coat, the dead eyes, and that crooked smile. Personally, I don't like this design very much, but it's what stuck, it's what everyone references. So the Slit-Mouthed Woman is a modern-day urban legend, often depicted with that long coat, long black hair, and wielding scissors. Although details can differ, one thing is always the same, that crooked, deformed mouth. She is often referred to as a monster or a ghost. In Japan, it's simply a yokai. Japanese yokai have a long history of being in all sorts of folk tales and mythology collections. But if you look through any of those, you won't find anything about the Slit-Mouthed Woman. So this originally made me skeptical about the origin stories you hear everywhere, so I had to dig a little deeper. I think most people are familiar with the very popular theory that claims it's as old as the 1600s. Basically, a woman obsessed with her own beauty was unfaithful to her husband, who, once discovering this, slashed her face open from ear to ear with a sword, a knife. It varies, but the end result is always the same. Husband kills wife, shouts, "Who will find you beautiful now?" and then kills himself. This woman is now damned for eternity in the form of a ghost, targeting mostly younger men or even children, and asks them if they find her beautiful. If they say yes, she takes off her mask to reveal the hideous scar, and then if they say no or run away, they die. Now, if they still say yes, she will follow them home and kill them later on, which isn't very fair. So that's the most popular origin story, but has it really been around since the 1600s? There are similar ghost stories for sure. You'd think the Slit-Mouthed Woman would be included in some sort of mythology collection, or depicted in some old art like other yokai, like the kappa for example. But there's absolutely nothing. What it all breaks down to is the difference between urban legend and folk tales. There are similarities, but really they aren't the same. Folk tales have a rich history passed on for centuries. Urban legends are all hearsay, word of mouth, like a game of telephone. Someone said something to someone else, they knew something that happened to a friend of a friend, and details change. And that's what happened with this yokai. Sometimes she's carrying a knife, other times a sickle, other times scissors. She was the murdered wife of a samurai, or she was the victim of a botched surgery. You can scare her away with a specific hair gel or with hard candy. There is nothing really consistent with all of these stories. The earliest connection I found was from 1754 in the Gifu region. There was some sort of rebellion against farmers in Gujo, a small town in Gifu, and somehow this rebellion became a yokai legend where the yokai began to take characteristics of what we today know as the Kuchisake-onna. How and why, I have no idea. Let's get to the popular case in 1978. In that same Gifu region, a farmer claimed to have seen a strange woman on her property in her garden with what looked to be a huge slash across her mouth. Apparently, authorities were contacted, but nothing else really came from the story, but it would make the news, and that spread like wildfire. Another popular theory, and it seems pretty plausible, and it's probably the actual origin, is that parents in this area were concerned with their children coming home on time, so this so-called Slit-Mouthed Woman was probably all fabricated, and it worked. Children were scared, so it was a successful scare tactic. Either way, this all began in Gifu in the late 70s. Eventually, another piece to the origin would involve an incident that happened 10 years prior, in 1968. In another part of Gifu, a landslide caused 2 buses to fall off the side of a mountain, plummeting into a river below. Out of the 107 passengers on both, only 3 survived, and only 4 bodies were ever recovered, but they were not in good shape at all. Now, this was a very real, tragic event, the biggest bus accident to this day in Japan. But somehow, I guess because it happened in Gifu, the Slit-Mouthed Woman was linked to this event. A child's skull was supposedly recovered from this accident, but the skull had a huge crack along the mouth. And the rumors say it belonged to the Slit-Mouthed Woman, who had come back 10 years later to haunt the area. It's a scary story, but the truth is no such skull was ever recovered from that scene, so sorry to ruin the spooky fun. So apparently a newspaper published the story of the woman seeing a scary person on her farm. And, well, gossip spread fast, not just with the adults, but children in the area as well. Now, this could have all just stayed in the small town of Gifu, but due to cram schools, children from all different areas gathered, and that's where the rumors began to spread to other parts of Japan. Aomori, Kagoshima, and so forth. And by the summer of 1979, everyone had their own story. Some claim the woman to be a disturbed patient who escaped from a hospital scaring children. That seems possible. Most of these early sightings claimed she carried a sickle. That was a pretty common tool for farmers in that area. Well, with all these crazy stories, it was only a matter of time before someone started imitating what they have heard.
Wait! What are you doing? Stop!
Let's think back a few years over here when we had all those clown sightings. Well, perhaps it all started out as a goof, but that influenced others and multiple people began sighting clowns. The same thing happened with this yokai, with one popular example. In 1979, a cosmetologist was having fun with her friend and used makeup to simulate what they had been hearing in the news. She gave herself a huge scar across her face, but was then egged on by her friend to not let all that time go to waste and to have some fun. So she went out with a knife to scare a friend. However, police were notified by a bystander, and she was taken into custody. Throughout 1979, people would spread gossip about spotting this Slit-Mouthed Woman for themselves. Whether it was more people pulling pranks, actual disturbed women wandering the streets, or perhaps a real yokai, or maybe just bullshit to scare a friend, the world will never know, because after that summer, it all faded away. No other major sightings, no news articles, nothing to come for years. It was during the 80s and 90s, urban legend books would begin to include this story from Gifu, detailing the events of the late 70s. These books became popular among younger people, so in the 90s a whole new generation began to fear this tale. And with the rise of the internet and blogs, a whole slew of new details came to be. Also during this time was the rise of cosmetic surgery, which would be another origin story. A woman wasn't very happy with her appearance, fearing that her mouth was too small, so she had some surgery done to her face, but it was botched, and she became the Slit-Mouthed Woman. But now, instead of carrying a sickle, the stories included scissors or a scalpel. Now she wasn't simply just a menacing presence, she attacked children. Blogs detailed violent and bloody attacks, though no actual news articles or police reports exist. But that's besides the point. It was all now meant to get scarier and scarier. She was now supernatural as stories came out about her chasing motorcyclists. She was given fox eyes in some stories. Even Korea had their own version as well. Yes, this was all part of a second boom, and well, it hasn't really slowed down since. She's been in all sorts of anime and manga, there's all sorts of movies of her out there, but throughout all of this, no matter how the story unfolds, she always represents the same thing: fear. Specifically, the culmination of children's fears. Something as fantastical as a psycho ghost chasing people down dark alleys isn't exactly the most believable for us adults, but children love urban legends. Think of it, Slender Man, Pyramid Head, Siren Head, it's all the same in Japan as well. This Slit-Mouthed Woman is the quintessential modern folktale. This isn't some old yokai story passed down from generation to generation. It was born in 1978 and was given life by school children. Urban legend books helped it gain notoriety again for a new generation, and blogs took that story and carried it throughout the world. The only reason why this story has become what it is today is because people were fascinated with it.